Before we get into the ending of I Will Find You, we need to understand that the entire series is built around a mystery that everyone believes has already been solved. For years, David Burroughs has been sitting in prison for the murder of his 3-year-old son, Matthew. The evidence appeared overwhelming. Matthew was supposedly found dead in his bed. A bloodied baseball bat was connected to the crime. Witnesses testified against David, and his history of sleep terrors made investigators believe he could have killed his son without remembering it. Because of that, the case was considered closed, and David was left to spend the rest of his life carrying the guilt of losing his child while insisting he was innocent. The entire story changes when Rachel Mills discovers a photograph taken at Six Flags. In the background is a boy who looks exactly like Matthew. Not only does he resemble him, but he also has the same birthmark. This discovery becomes the spark that reopens a case everyone thought was over. David refuses to ignore the possibility that his son is alive, escapes prison, and begins a desperate search for the truth. As the investigation progresses, what initially looks like a simple kidnapping mystery slowly reveals a much larger conspiracy involving powerful people, manipulated evidence, hidden identities, and years of deception. One of the biggest revelations in the series is that Matthew never died on the night everyone believed he was murdered. The child whose body was discovered in David's home was actually another boy named Martin Bischoff. Martin was a child from Switzerland whose life had already been filled with tragedy. After losing his guardians, he eventually ended up in an orphanage connected to the wealthy Payne family. At some point, Martin disappeared from that orphanage and was never found. The truth, revealed near the end of the series, is that Martin was taken and used as part of an elaborate scheme to make the world believe Matthew Burroughs had been killed. This discovery completely destroys the foundation of the original murder case. The DNA evidence that convicted David was manipulated. The blood evidence used during the trial was falsified. Witness testimony was influenced and corrupted. Even the identification of the body was wrong. Everything that placed David behind bars was built on lies. The real victim was Martin, while Matthew remained alive the entire time. The next major question is why any of this happened in the first place. The answer leads directly to Hayden Payne. Throughout much of the series, Hayden appears trustworthy. He presents himself as someone willing to help Rachel and David uncover answers. However, the final episodes reveal that he has been at the center of the mystery from the beginning. Years earlier, Rachel's name became connected to Berg Reproductive, a fertility clinic associated with the Payne family. Cheryl had secretly used Rachel's name during treatment, creating confusion about who the actual patient was. Hayden eventually learned that Rachel's name had appeared in the clinic records and became obsessed with the idea that she wanted to have a child. Through connections within the clinic, Hayden arranged for his own genetic material to be used as a donor. He believed that he would become the biological father of Rachel's future child without her knowledge. What Hayden did not realize was that Rachel was never the patient. Cheryl was. Even more importantly, Cheryl was already pregnant before the procedure took place. Matthew was actually David's biological son all along. Hayden spent years believing something that was never true. The situation became even more twisted when Hayden later met Matthew. During a 4th of July gathering with Rachel's family, he saw the child and convinced himself that Matthew was the son he was meant to have. Rather than accepting reality, Hayden embraced his fantasy. In his mind, Matthew belonged to him. That obsession eventually became dangerous enough to lead to kidnapping and murder. The night Matthew supposedly died was actually the night Hayden carried out his plan. He murdered Martin Bischoff and placed the boy's body where Matthew's body was expected to be found. Using the Payne family's influence and resources, he ensured that investigators identified Martin as Matthew. At the same time, he secretly took the real Matthew and disappeared with him. For the next several years, Matthew lived under a completely different identity. He became Theo. Hayden raised him as his own son, constantly moving and creating new lives whenever necessary. The most tragic aspect of this situation is that Matthew genuinely believed Hayden was his father. He had been raised that way for years, and had no memory of his previous life. By the time David finally gets close to finding him, Matthew sees Hayden as the only parent he has ever known. The series also reveals that Hayden was never acting completely alone. His mother, Gertrude Payne, knew far more than she admitted. Throughout the story, Gertrude protects her son and helps maintain the lies surrounding Matthew's disappearance. She understands the truth, but chooses loyalty to her family over justice. However, her protection of Hayden ultimately contributes to the destruction of everything around them. One of the most important moments in the finale occurs when Rachel finally confronts Hayden with the truth about Matthew's paternity. Hayden has spent years believing Matthew is his biological child. Rachel reveals that Cheryl was already pregnant before visiting the fertility clinic. Matthew was never Hayden's son. The revelation shakes Hayden completely because it destroys the justification he has built his entire life around. At first, Hayden refuses to believe it, but Rachel continues pushing him. She questions whether he ever actually saw the paternity test results that supposedly confirmed Matthew was a Payne. This forces Hayden to confront an uncomfortable possibility. His mother may have hidden the truth from him. The truth finally comes out when it becomes clear that Gertrude always knew. She knew Hayden was not Matthew's biological father. She understood the results, but concealed them in an effort to protect her son from reality. Ironically, her attempt to shield him helped fuel years of obsession, kidnapping, and murder. Hayden reacts with rage. Feeling betrayed by the one person he trusted most, he turns his gun on Gertrude and kills her. The moment demonstrates how completely his mental state has collapsed. The illusion he built his life around has been shattered, and he lashes out at the person who allowed him to continue believing it. After killing his mother, Hayden becomes increasingly desperate. He takes Rachel hostage and demands Matthew. Even at this point, he refuses to let go of the fantasy that Matthew belongs with him. The situation escalates into a final confrontation involving David, Rachel, Sarah Greer, and the armed guards protecting the Payne estate. Matthew himself becomes trapped in the middle of the conflict. Unlike everyone else, he still sees Hayden as his father. He does not fully understand the years of manipulation and violence that led to this moment. The tragedy of Matthew's situation is that recovering him physically is only the first step. Emotionally and psychologically, he has spent years living as someone else. The final chase pushes everyone toward an inevitable conclusion. Hayden flees with Matthew, hoping to start over once again. However, Sarah intervenes and forces his vehicle off course. Matthew escapes into the woods, creating one last opportunity for David and Hayden to confront each other directly. In the woods, the conflict finally reaches its climax. David and Hayden search for Matthew while carrying completely different motivations. David wants to rescue his son and bring him home. Hayden wants to keep hold of the life he created through lies. Their confrontation becomes the culmination of everything that has happened throughout the season. During the struggle, Hayden shoots David. For a moment, it appears that David's journey may end in tragedy. After everything he has endured, he is left gravely wounded. Yet even then, his focus remains on Matthew. Hayden finally realizes that his situation is hopeless. The truth has been exposed. Matthew is slipping away from him, and the authorities have surrounded him. In one of the finale's most emotional moments, he admits that Matthew was the best thing that ever happened to him. The statement does not excuse his actions, but it reveals how deeply his obsession consumed him. He genuinely loved the child, but that love became twisted into possession and control. As Hayden raises his weapon, Sarah Greer is forced to make a split-second decision. She shoots him, ending the threat once and for all. Hayden dies, bringing the central mystery and conflict of the series to a close. The emotional peak of the finale comes immediately afterward. David, bleeding from his wounds, finally reaches Matthew. For years, he has been searching for his son. He escaped prison, risked his life, uncovered a massive conspiracy, and fought through countless obstacles. Looking at Matthew, he simply says, "I found you." The line captures the entire heart of the series. More than solving a mystery or proving his innocence, David's journey was always about finding his child. The series then jumps forward 8 months. Thankfully, David survives his injuries. His conviction is overturned, and the truth about the case becomes public. The lies that destroyed his life are finally exposed. After years of being labeled a murderer, he is officially cleared. Rachel also finds closure. She writes about everything that happened and publishes both a major story and a book detailing the case. Her decision reflects how central she became to uncovering the truth. What began as a suspicion over a photograph ultimately led her to expose an enormous conspiracy. The future of the supporting characters also becomes clearer. Cheryl moves forward with her life and gives birth to a daughter. Adam faces consequences for helping David escape prison, losing his position with the police. Sarah rises professionally, eventually taking leadership of the fugitive task force, while her father steps away from active duty. The final scenes reveal that the gathering everyone attends is actually the funeral of David's father, Lenny. Although Lenny dies before the story concludes, he at least lives long enough to see David reunited with Matthew and exonerated. In many ways, he receives the closure he spent years fighting for. The ending also acknowledges that Matthew's recovery will not happen overnight. He spent years believing he was Theo. He lost much of his childhood and has memories connected to a completely different life. Being reunited with David and Cheryl does not magically erase that trauma. The family now faces the difficult process of rebuilding relationships and helping Matthew understand who he really is. The final moment focuses on hope rather than certainty. David watches his family together while Rachel stands beside him. They do not need a dramatic declaration about the future. The simple image of them standing together is enough. They survived years of pain, loss, betrayal, and deception. Matthew has been found, David has been freed, and the truth has finally emerged. The deeper meaning of the ending is that truth eventually defeats even the most carefully constructed lies. Powerful people manipulated evidence, destroyed lives, and rewrote reality to protect themselves. Yet a father's refusal to stop searching ultimately exposed everything. David lost years of his life, but he never abandoned the belief that his son was still out there. That determination is what carries him through the entire story and ultimately leads him to Matthew. By the end of I Will Find You, the mystery is solved. Matthew was alive all along. Martin Bischoff was the child who died. Hayden Payne orchestrated the kidnapping because of his delusion that Matthew was his son. Gertrude concealed the truth for years, and David was innocent from the very beginning. After years of suffering, David finally gets the one thing he never stopped fighting for: the chance to be a father to his son once again.